My name is Nancy and I'm 38 years old. I work with children at my church in Denver, and for most of my life, people saw me as someone who had it all together. I was the one others came to for prayer, the one who seemed to know all the right Bible verses, the one who could encourage anyone going through a hard time. But what nobody knew was that I was fighting a battle that was slowly destroying me from the inside out. For 12 long years, I had been trapped in something I was too ashamed to tell anyone about. It started innocently enough when I was in my 20s, just reading romance novels to escape the stress of everyday life. But what began as harmless entertainment slowly became something much darker. I found myself living more in fantasy relationships with fictional characters than in the real world. I would spend hours every day lost in these stories, creating emotional connections that felt more real to me than actual relationships. I knew it wasn't right. I knew God wanted more for me than this secret life I was living. I tried everything I could think of to break free. I went to counseling, joined accountability groups, threw away books, deleted apps, made promises to God that I couldn't keep. Each time I failed, the shame grew heavier. I felt like damaged goods, like someone God could never really use because of this secret struggle that seemed to have such power over me. The worst part wasn't just the addiction itself, it was the loneliness that came with it. I felt like I was living a double life, smiling and serving at church while dying inside, wondering if anyone would still love me if they knew the truth about what I was really struggling with. I had convinced myself that God was disappointed in me, that I was too broken to be used for anything meaningful in His kingdom. On March 15th of last year, my whole world changed in a way I never could have imagined. I had always known I had some food allergies, but I had never experienced anything like what happened that Tuesday afternoon. I was at a church potluck helping serve food to families in our community when someone asked me to try a new dessert they had brought. I should have asked about the ingredients, but I didn't want to seem difficult or demanding. Within minutes, I felt something was terribly wrong. My throat began to close, my skin broke out in hives, and I couldn't breathe. The last thing I remember was one of the other volunteers calling 911 as I collapsed on the church kitchen floor. Later, I learned that my heart had stopped beating and I had been clinically dead for 18 minutes. But what happened during those 18 minutes changed everything I thought I knew about God, about myself, and about the struggle I had been carrying for so many years. It started with the strangest sensation, like I was floating. I looked down and saw my own body lying on the emergency room table, surrounded by doctors and nurses working frantically to bring me back to life. I could see everything so clearly, even though I knew I should have been unconscious. There was no fear, only this incredible sense of peace and curiosity as I watched them trying to restart my heart. Then something began pulling me away from that scene. It wasn't scary or forceful, it was gentle, like being drawn by the most beautiful music you've ever heard, even though there was no sound. I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a tunnel filled with the most brilliant light I had ever seen. It wasn't harsh or blinding like looking at the sun. Instead, it felt warm and welcoming, like coming home after being away for a very long time. As I moved through this light, memories from my childhood started flooding back, times when I had felt close to God, moments of pure joy and innocence before life got complicated. I remembered being 7 years old, praying by my bedside and feeling like Jesus was right there in the room with me. I remembered the first time I felt called to work with children, how my heart would leap when I saw their simple faith and trust. All of this was happening so fast, yet it felt like I had all the time in the world to experience each memory fully. The deeper I went into this light, the more I began to understand that I wasn't just having a dream or hallucination. This was more real than anything I had ever experienced in my physical body. Every emotion was magnified, every thought was crystal clear, and there was this overwhelming sense that I was about to learn something that would change me forever. I had no idea that the very struggle I had been most ashamed of was about to be revealed as something completely different than what I had always believed it to be. And then I saw Him. I knew it was Jesus before He even spoke a word. There was such love in His eyes, not the disappointed, frustrated look I had imagined He would have when He looked at me, but pure, unconditional love mixed with what I can only describe as pride. He was proud of me. I couldn't understand why, but I could feel it radiating from Him like warmth from a fire. He didn't speak with words the way we do here on earth. Instead, He communicated directly to my heart and mind, and I understood everything perfectly. The first thing He showed me was my life, but not in the way I expected. Instead of focusing on all my failures and secret struggles, He showed me all the times I had served Him faithfully despite my pain. He showed me children whose lives had been touched through my ministry, families who had been encouraged by my prayers, moments when I had chosen to love others even when I felt broken inside. Then he began to explain something that completely shattered everything I thought I understood about my struggle. He told me that what I had been calling my greatest weakness was actually preparation for my greatest calling. He showed me that the enemy, Satan himself, specifically targets people who are destined for powerful ministry by attacking them in the area of sexual temptation and emotional fantasy. He revealed to me that the enemy does this because he knows the authority these people will carry once they overcome their struggles. Jesus explained that I hadn't been fighting random temptation. I had been in spiritual warfare training. Every time I had fallen and gotten back up, every time I had cried out to God in desperation, every time I had felt ashamed but refused to give up completely, I was being prepared for something much bigger than I could have imagined. He told me that the depth of my struggle was actually a sign of the depth of the ministry he had planned for my life. He showed me a verse I had read many times before, Luke 4 verse 18, but he revealed its meaning in a way I had never understood. He explained that over the centuries, translations had softened the true meaning of this passage, and that the original Greek text speaks of believers being sent not just to comfort the brokenhearted, but to demolish strongholds and set captives completely free. He told me that those who have struggled most deeply with sexual sin and emotional bondage are often the ones he chooses to carry this demolishing power, because they understand the enemy's tactics better than anyone else. As he shared this with me, I began to weep, not tears of sadness but tears of relief and wonder. For 12 years, I had believed I was disqualified from meaningful ministry because of my secret struggle. But Jesus was telling me the exact opposite. He revealed to me that my struggle hadn't been random temptation or personal weakness, it had been the enemy's desperate attempt to stop me from stepping into the calling God had on my life. Satan knew that if I ever understood my true identity and authority, I would become a threat to the sexual strongholds he had built in countless lives. Then Jesus began to teach me something that I knew I would need to remember and share with others when I returned. He showed me a 7-day spiritual warfare protocol that would help people like me understand their true identity and step into their authority. He explained that this wasn't about behavior modification or trying harder to resist temptation. It was about identity transformation and recognizing the spiritual authority that comes from overcoming. He taught me that the first step was identity declaration, learning to see ourselves not as victims of sexual sin, but as warriors who had been specifically chosen and trained for spiritual battle. He showed me that every time we had resisted temptation, even if we later fell, we were building spiritual muscle. Every time we had cried out to God in desperation, we were learning to rely on His strength rather than our own. Every time we had felt ashamed but refused to give up on God completely, we were proving our commitment to the kingdom of heaven. The second step he revealed was authority recognition, understanding that our struggles had given us special authority over the very areas where we had been attacked. He explained that this is why the enemy works so hard to keep people in shame about their sexual struggles, because shame prevents us from recognizing the authority we've gained through overcoming. He told me that someone who has never struggled with sexual temptation cannot minister to sexual bondage with the same power as someone who has fought that battle and emerged victorious through God's grace. Jesus then showed me the third step, intercessory prayer with understanding. He revealed that when we pray for others who are struggling with sexual sin, our prayers carry special weight because we understand the battle they're fighting. Our intercession isn't just sympathetic, it's strategic because we know exactly how the enemy operates in this area. He showed me that this kind of prayer actually weakens the enemy's grip on entire family lines and communities. The fourth step he taught me was testimony preparation. He explained that our stories of struggle and victory become weapons in the hands of God to destroy strongholds in other people's lives. But he emphasized that we must tell our stories not from a place of shame or self-focus, but from a place of authority and God's glory. He showed me that when someone who has overcome sexual bondage shares their testimony with the right heart, it literally breaks chains off other people as they listen. The fifth step was strategic warfare, learning to use our authority to come against sexual strongholds not just in our own lives, but in our families, communities, and spheres of influence. Jesus revealed to me that people who have overcome in this area carry a special anointing to break generational curses and patterns of sexual sin that have been passed down through family lines for decades or even centuries. The sixth step he called authority walking, learning to live each day with the confidence that comes from knowing who we are and what we've overcome. He showed me that this isn't about pride or boasting, but about walking in the truth of our identity as overcomers and freedom fighters in God's kingdom. He explained that when we walk in this authority, it creates an atmosphere around us where sexual strongholds lose their power over other people. The seventh and final step was commission acceptance, fully embracing the calling to minister freedom to others who are trapped in the same struggles we once faced. Jesus told me that this was always his plan, that those who had been most tormented by sexual sin would become the most effective ministers of sexual purity and freedom. He showed me that this wasn't just about individual healing, but about a revival that would sweep through the church as people began to understand the true purpose behind their struggles. Then Jesus taught me a specific prayer that would activate this authority and help people step into their calling as freedom fighters. He showed me how this prayer would declare the believer's identity as a warrior commissioned to destroy sexual strongholds, and how it would break the power of shame that had kept so many people hiding in defeat instead of walking in victory. As he taught me this prayer, I could feel power flowing through every word, and I knew that this was something I would need to share with others when I returned. But there was something else Jesus wanted me to understand before I went back. He showed me how the enemy's strategy had been working in the church for generations. He revealed to me that Satan had been successful in keeping Christians trapped in shame about their sexual struggles, making them believe they were disqualified from ministry rather than qualified for it. He showed me how this had prevented countless powerful warriors from stepping into their calling, leaving the church weakened in its ability to fight sexual strongholds in society. Jesus explained that the enemy had also worked through Bible translations over the centuries, subtly changing words and phrases that originally spoke of demolishing power and warrior authority, softening them into more comfortable language about comfort and healing. While comfort and healing are important, he told me the original text spoke of much more aggressive spiritual warfare against the powers of darkness. He showed me that understanding this original meaning would be crucial for the revival he was preparing to release through people who had overcome sexual struggles. As this incredible encounter continued, I began to understand that my personal struggle with romance novels and emotional fantasy had been preparation for ministry to women all over the world who were trapped in similar patterns. Jesus showed me that in this digital age, emotional and romantic fantasy addictions were becoming epidemic among Christian women, but most were too ashamed to seek help. He revealed to me that my experience and victory would be a key to helping these women find freedom and step into their own callings. He also showed me something that broke my heart and filled me with urgency at the same time. I saw countless people, men and women, young and old, who were meant to be powerful ministers of God's kingdom, but who were trapped in cycles of sexual sin and shame. They believed they were too broken to be used by God, not realizing that their struggles were actually their qualifications for ministry. The enemy had convinced them that their battles disqualified them, when in reality, those battles were training them for the most important work they would ever do. Then Jesus began to prepare me for my return to earth. He told me that I would not only be physically healed from the allergic reaction that had caused my death, but that I would carry a new spiritual authority that would enable me to minister to others trapped in sexual and emotional bondage. He explained that my testimony would be a weapon in his hands to break shame off people's lives and help them understand their true identity as overcomers and freedom fighters. He warned me that not everyone would understand or accept this message at first. Some people would be uncomfortable with the idea that sexual struggle could be preparation for ministry rather than disqualification from it. But he assured me that those who were meant to receive this revelation would recognize the truth of it in their hearts, and that this understanding would set in motion a revival of freedom and purity that would spread throughout the church and into the world. As our encounter drew to a close, I felt myself being pulled back toward my physical body. But this time, I wasn't afraid or reluctant to return. I was filled with excitement and purpose, knowing that I was coming back with a message that would change everything for people who had been trapped in shame and defeat. The last thing Jesus told me was that my struggles were not over. I would still face challenges and temptations, but now I would face them with a completely different understanding of who I was and why I had gone through what I had gone through. I suddenly found myself back in my body in the hospital room, surrounded by amazed doctors and nurses who couldn't explain how I had come back to life after being dead for 18 minutes. But more miraculous than my physical healing was the complete transformation that had taken place in my heart and mind. The shame that had weighed me down for 12 years was completely gone, replaced by a burning passion to help others find the same freedom and understanding I had received. In the months since my return, I have seen God use my story in ways I never could have imagined. Through online ministry and partnerships with local churches, I have been able to reach women all over the world who were trapped in the same patterns I had struggled with. As I share the prayer Jesus taught me and the revelation about spiritual warfare and identity, I have watched countless women step out of shame and into the authority they were always meant to carry. The most beautiful part of this journey has been seeing other people realize that their deepest struggles were actually their greatest qualifications for ministry. I have watched as men and women who believed they were too broken to be used by God began to understand that they were actually specially trained warriors, equipped with unique authority to destroy the very strongholds that had once held them captive. This is the revival Jesus showed me, people who have overcome sexual sin becoming the most powerful ministers of freedom and purity, breaking generational curses and advancing God's kingdom in ways the enemy never saw coming. If you've been touched by this story and want to be part of more testimonies like this one that show how God can transform any situation for His glory, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us share these powerful stories with people around the world who need to hear that no matter what they're struggling with, God has a beautiful plan to turn their pain into purpose and their mess into their message.